Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 131. We are back with a fantastic guest today, who I will introduce you to in a minute. But this is going to be a good one because we've known this guest for quite a while, probably about a decade. We've attended various courses and done various things together. But this is going to be a nice conversation. But beforehand, I will introduce you to. We have got a full house of hosts today. So I will introduce you to Mr. Peter Lant. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm all right. I'm a bit worried about this episode actually, because like sometimes it's quite hard to get the guests to talk, and this guy's quite stilted in his talk, isn't he? He doesn't really talk very much, so it's going to be quite tricky to draw information out of him, I think.
Okay.
I'm saying nothing already.
See, he's already talking, and I haven't even introduced him yet. There you go.
There it. Right, Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you doing?
Fine.
Very concise, very
well, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I'd act as a kind of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Oh, okay. Okay, nice.
Not
Good.
Much.
Good. Maybe
Have I thrown you, James? I've thrown you.
No, I'm sure you'll
You've
chime
got to be
in.
able to deal with this.
I'm sure you'll chime in later on as we get going.
If you want to be the next Michael Parkinson, James, you've got to be able to deal with difficult interviewees.
Michael Parkinson, God, you're going back about 20 years there.
Well, I mean,
20 years and the rest.
Well, no, I mean when he finished.
Yeah,
probably a long while, but yes, okay.
I'm probably more Alan Carr.
I think I'm probably aiming for the next Des O'Connor.
Okay.
Okay, right. Okay. So today we are joined by Mr. Ben Causa. How are you doing, Ben?
Yeah, very well, thanks, James.
Excellent. So Ben runs a company Fit6. He is sort of sports therapy, strength and conditioning coach. And like I say, we've known Ben for a long time. Various courses we've done together, from FMS stuff with Brett Jones to kind of various, I think probably kettlebell courses and fitness business type courses and all different kinds of things over the years. We did also, if you recognize the name Causa, we did have Ben's wife, Vicky Causa, on probably a couple of months back now, I think.
November, I think it was.
You had her on first before me.
Yeah, we had Vicky on from Real Strong Women, which was a couple of months back, probably November time. So Ben is now joining us today. So Ben, to start off, then, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your background, your origin story, I suppose, where you started from in the industry? I know you've been in the industry for a long time, and you've moved through various kind of iterations of what you do, and you've worked at various places, and obviously you run your own business. But yeah, if you can just kind of give us a bit of background on yourself, and then we can kind of ask questions and delve into different things as we go, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, as you said, I have been in the industry now for quite some period of time. I actually was thinking about this before coming on here, how many years it's been. So I've been in and around the fitness industry for about 26 years now, which is quite scary, really. Like, it's gone by very quickly, it's been a journey, and it definitely I've kind of managed to be in different sectors of that industry. I've worked in the private gyms, public gyms, corporate gyms. I've managed gyms. I'm now sort of obviously running my own business, and yeah, I've moved away a little bit from the sort of the gym side and sport therapy side now. But I kind of fell into the industry really originally. I kind of was in between work and going out to work or going into college. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then a friend of mine said, well, you're passionate about fitness and training and stuff. Why don't you become a fitness instructor? So I ended up working in a local council gym for 2 years when I was about 19, 20. And then, I guess I was always passionate about exercise and training. So I kind of continued that journey, moved into the corporate sector with a company called, well, you'll know it's Nuffield now. Back then it was Blade Runner.
Okay. Yeah.
So then Nuffield Health took them over. So I worked for Johnson & Johnson in High Wycombe. So I was there for 17 years. But as I did that, I was running my own business alongside that, which is Fit6, obviously you mentioned before. And you know, I've done other bits and bobs alongside that, workshops, remember Bulletproof Your Body. Me and Dan, who was my business partner, we were doing that for a couple of years. Yeah, I was sort of throwing myself in here and there. I moved away from the personal training side probably about 15 years ago. I felt there was going to be, and I was right, a huge kind of uptake in personal trainers in that industry. It was kind of one of those jobs where people were more and more people getting into it. And I felt like I had positioned myself where I'd got together quite a lot of knowledge from courses and stuff, but I wanted to set myself apart from that. So that's when I moved to the strength and conditioning side of things with the UK Strength and Conditioning Association, and did a stint at West Ham as well for a little bit. That was doing the sports therapy side of things, working alongside the massage, doing sports massage for the football players before and after training. So that was a pretty cool period. But yeah, all the way along, I've sort of like built up more and more qualifications and looked to sort of expand what I do. I've been always passionate about keeping people injury free, because I was always frustrated whenever I'd get injured. So with a view of like sort of going down the physiotherapy route, it kind of like taking out a lot of time to do that was never really kind of wasn't going to be possible. So I looked at the sport therapy side of things, and that's why I ended up going down that route and training sport therapy, and which is what obviously now what I do, and my business is all about that now. The key thing is with this is I try to rather than just like fixing people and send them on their way. We kind of came up with, me and Dan came up with an idea of trying to get people from the point of rehab back into performance. So kind of like our USP would be like we bridge that gap between the rehab world and the performance world. And generally what tends to happen with people when they're seeing physios, chiros, osteos, sports massage therapists or whatever, they'll have like a baseline of where they're having some release work done. They might do some low level activation stuff as well, but then they're being sent straight back into their training, exercise or whatever it is, and then they're kind of getting injured again. And from that, we sort of like was born in our mind the training injury rehab cycle. So what we see as our job is to actually break that cycle. So rather than just kind of doing that release work, going back into training and exercise, there's a middle part of that that's missing, and that's the bit that we feel now in our work. So excellent. Yeah, it's taken 26 years to get to that point.
You're an overnight success.
Yeah, well, business is booming, so you know.
Can I ask what Fit6? Where did that come from? What's the story behind that? What does that mean? What's the significance of the name, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course. So the way me and Dan saw movements when we came up with the name, or sort of how the human moves, is basically through 6 primal movement patterns. So you've got the lunge, the hinge, push, pull, rotation, and squat. So we kind of like this is kind of like Dan John philosophy. I like to try to keep everything as simple and effective as I possibly can, like, you know, keep it simple, stupid type thing. And I always think that a lot of times with trainers back in the day, they would overcomplicate stuff. There'd be a lot of stuff that you would do in the gym, like jump volume. So rather than that, like, we always adamant that it's these 6 patterns. Obviously you've got like a vertical push and a horizontal push, vertical pull, horizontal pull alongside that. We'd see the lunge pattern as a gait pattern as well. So you might call that carries, or you know, some other coaches call that like loaded carries, or a gait itself. But we focus on the lunge pattern as part of that process. And then alongside the 6 primal movement patterns, you have obviously 3 planes of motion. So in my view, is we should train all 3 planes of motion, you know, sagittal, transverse and frontal, 33.3%, which is why, like, I guess, you know, certain training plans, you know, even things like, you know, CrossFit, they get a bit of a bad rep because people are injured or whatever, because they train a lot in sagittal, you know, basically going forwards, backwards, up and down a lot.
I'm just going to hold this up, Ben. I'm just going to hold this up, okay? Because I was just going to ask you. I was going to say I think we've done 131 episodes, and we've never mentioned sagittal, frontal, or transverse plane.
Oh, really? Oh,
in terms of the words, because a lot of the people who listen to this are, you know, we've obviously got a number of gym owners and personal trainers and therapists and stuff, but a lot of people are end users. So can you just explain, for those who aren't watching, I've just held up the acronym Hammer. We've not used that for a little while. Can you just explain in layman's terms what those 3 sort of directions of movement, the planes of movement are?
Yeah, sure. So most people know, like, sagittal plane is like they would be doing a squat up and down, or a deadlift, picking up from the floor, moving forwards, moving backwards, like running. That's in 1 plane of motion, and it's quite rigid to that plane. Frontal would be like side to side. So an example of that, and it's been a really rubbish example, but it's one that pops into my head straight away, is like doing like banded lateral walks. Would be an example of that. You got rotational, which is the transverse plane. So that might be like on a cable machine, like doing wood chops or maybe Russian twists, something like that. That would be that. But so how I view training should be, we're looking to program those 6 primal movement patterns in 33.3% of each of those movement planes.
Yes.
And that to me is training.
Yeah.
And we overcomplicate it.
Yeah. I shared something just earlier today. Actually, I was listening to Dan John's latest podcast, and it was a quote. It was just kind of said in passing. He was answering a question, and he said, "Have the courage not to get bored." And he was talking to coaches, but also talking to people who train, whereby we feel the need sometimes, like you said, you use the term junk volume, or, you know, stuff, you know, fluff, just rubbish that you kind of can put in. And because people sometimes get bored doing, you know, a press, like you say, a push, a pull, a hinge, a squat, a loaded carry, a lunge, a rotation, you know, and we try and make things, like you say, more complicated, more entertaining, more sexy, because some people, you know, get bored, you know, and I think that's the main thing. It's just not overcomplicating things. And it's, I mean, we Pete, myself, Paul, you, I'm sure, when we're training, we don't do loads of fancy, great stuff that looks amazing on Instagram most of the time. It's the basics.
Back to the basics, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Speak for yourself. My stuff looks amazing.
Your stuff looks very sexy, Pete.
It looks exactly the same every bloody time.
I was gonna say in those pajama bottoms outside. Anyway, Ben. Sorry, yeah. So we got the six sort of fundamental movements, if you like, and then the three planes of motion. Yeah.
And you know, I think with going back to those 6 planes of motion, you know, we see them as like, well, I'm referring to them as gym-based movements, but like a big part of what me and Dan have done and where we've looked to go, and this is going back probably 15 years ago now, so it's probably a little bit more forward thinking in its time. But fundamentally, we've gone back in time thinking about a squat. What would we use a squat for? You know, you're actually, it's a human resting position, right? It's not to load up necessarily, although if you're picking something up off the floor, you may squat down to pick it up, or you might hinge to pick it up. That's a human pattern that you were designed to do, right? But thinking of like more forward thinking, the population that we're in at the time of when we designed this, it was very much all about aesthetics and bodybuilding. You know, it was that kind of period where you get a bicep, you do a bicep curl because you're completely focusing on that one particular muscle, or it's a tricep extension. It wasn't looking at the body as a whole, it was isolating body parts. And where we sort of saw stuff was that, okay, that's great for aesthetics, that's fine, it's no problem at all. But if you get deeper into it, like, and this goes back to a good friend of mine, and he's been a friend of the podcast as well, Chet Morjaria. He gave me a book once called Start With Why, Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
And if you ask anyone why they exercise, you know, why do you exercise? Oh, because I want to look good. Why do you want to look good? Oh, because I want to get a girlfriend. Why do you want to get a girlfriend? Because no, if you keep asking why, eventually you'll get to it. They don't want to die at a young age, and they want to be mobile for as long as they possibly can. That's fundamentally it, right? So why are we training so desperately for aesthetics and actually potentially causing more issues? Because we're training in isolation, the body isn't built like that. Why don't we look at the body as a whole and actually, in fact, train our bodies for longevity rather than just for this, you know, this like next 2 or 3 years to look good? Makes sense, right? And then when you do that, you actually then open up the demographic of people to a whole different variety of people. And actually, you're working with more elderly clientele, you know, helping them to move better. You know, no one wants to be like the age 70, stuck in their bed, unable to get out of the bed because their body doesn't work, you know? So fundamentally, to me, longevity trumps aesthetics, and aesthetics is a byproduct of longevity.
I've been talking about that recently quite a lot the last few weeks, because there's a few people I've spoke to, even some of my guys as well, and I don't drill it into them, but I talk about a lot about how your age isn't a thing to hold you back. You know, because like a lot of people will say, oh, I'm in my 40s now, so, you know, it's downhill from here. And I've been talking about that a lot recently. The boredom thing, I've got a guy who's 60 and he's currently doing a thing, like it's kind of like the 10,000 swing challenge at the minute, but just because it's cold outside. So he does like 10, 15, 25 swings and then some exercises after that to fill in the gaps and all that. And then he keeps moving a bit. But when he gets to the 25 swings, he's like, it's so boring. And I'm like, it lasts like, what, 50 seconds? It's like, you know what I mean? He goes, oh, I get bored. And it's like, you get bored in 50 seconds. Like, anyway. But I've been talking to people a lot about this, and I've been talking about how, like, I was basically, I'm 46 now. Until I started taking this properly seriously, I was 37. You know, about 9 or 10 years ago, that's when I was like, right, I need to do something about this, because I was out of shape and all of that. If I hadn't have done anything, I would have declined from 37 down to wherever I'd be at 46 now. But actually, I'm stronger and fitter and healthier and all of that at 46 than I was at 37. So I've gone up and not declined. And I was talking about this to a guy. It's the same guy, actually. He's in a club, and there's an ex-Olympic West German rower in this club who's in his 80s, and he's nails. And he's in his 80s and he's still really strong. I said, yeah, but he's declining from an Olympic level. You know what I mean? So actually, it's like you've been saying, it's whatever level you're at, and it doesn't matter what age you're at, you can still, it's about slowing the decline down, because everyone's going to decline, aren't they, over time? Oh, yeah. But you can slow it down, and then you can actually make it happen. So, you know, I might get to 60 and I'll be roughly where I was when I was 35, or even better still. You know what I mean? So it's been really interesting to me that the last couple of weeks, because I've been hearing a lot of people saying that.
Also, as well, like coming from a treatment perspective, like I know you guys had Adam Meekins on, didn't you, as well?
Yes. Yeah.
So like I quite like some of his stuff that he talks about. Maybe is he a disruptor? But he's very opinionated in his thought processes and evidence-based. But I also like the way he talks about getting people away from all this like floor-based, you know, clams and all that kind of malarkey, and actually get the body to load, you know, move it and load it. And actual fact, the body isn't made of glass. You can push the body probably more than what you think you can. And people, and the terminology that, you know, that I think a lot of therapists use is actually like induces that kind of like fear factor with stuff. Whereas I'm like, no, you can do this. I had a lady the other day who was, she come to see me because she couldn't squat. She said, what's going on? So I do a very simple assessment in order to get people to squat. And once I assess them, obviously I then work on that route. But her main thing is, fundamentally, she wasn't connecting. she wasn't able to stack her pelvis over her rib cage over her pelvis very well. So when she came up into the squat, it looked like she was all over the place. So I wanted to demonstrate to her that she's way stronger than what she actually was. And I got her into a kneeling position. So she's kneeling on the floor, one leg up, one leg behind. I said, now get up. And she did the archetypal, put the hands on the leg, tried to, if she had something else around her, she'd have held on to something to pull herself up. But instead she put her hand there, and she kind of body jerked up. I said, okay, look, let's do that again, right? And she's got into this kind of this process. That's how she gets up off the floor. I'm like, stack the rib cage over your pelvis, create some tension. Yeah, principle of movement, right? Tension, relaxation. Create some tension in your core, and then when you do it, keep that tension. Now push off. And she did it. She's like, wow, she's just totally blown away. And it's like the fear factor of being able to get from a kneeling position to a standing. She couldn't do it. And the thing is, if I went down the conventional route, I would have been getting her doing glute bridges. We would have been doing probably some clam work. We've probably been doing some dead bugs. But she didn't need to do any of that. She just went straight into the movement. And it's a strange one sometimes. I mean, it's even like, I once had a lady turn up who, again, every time and I actually stole this from God, what's his name now? There's a physiotherapist, an Australian physiotherapist. The physio detective he's called. I can't think of his name now. He'll come back to me. And like, this lady was like, every time I squat, I'm in pain. I went, okay, fine. Can I see you do a squat? So she did a squat. So it's I met her for 5 minutes. Yeah, the consultation period or assessment consultation I do is an hour. So in about the first 5 minutes, I said, can I see you squat? So she goes down into this squat. Yeah, I'm in pain. I went, okay, cool. Do something different. She goes, what do you mean? I said, do something different in the squat and see how it feels. So she goes down, does a squat, self-corrects, and is no longer in pain. I didn't have to treat her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's like, what, is that it? And I was kind of like, man, that's like 10 minutes. She's gonna want more value for that time. You know what I mean? So I kind of did a little bit of soft tissue work or whatever. But I said to her, fundamentally, you just need to like be in a better position, and you're getting yourself out of pain.
That's amazing, because the body will find a way, right? I think that's brilliant, because there's so much stuff out there of like, when you squat, your feet need to face straight forwards and all that. And if you can't do that, there's something wrong with you. And then your knees track your toes. But most people can't do that without turning their feet out slightly and all that. But even if you tell someone that, they'll be like, oh, so that's the way you do it. Then it's like, no, how do you do it? What works for you? You will figure out a way. So the amount of people I get when they do a press above the head will grit their teeth and shrug their shoulders. And I'm like, have you got a sore neck and a sore jaw? They're like, yes. And I'm like, well, that's because you do, that's what you're doing. A guy who started with me recently is had a knackered shoulder and it's getting better, but he can't really raise his arm above his head properly. So I just had him with a stick, just doing like kind of back and forwards, like lunging basically to get used to having his arm above his head, but it's supported, but it's putting a little bit of weight onto it. With the arm that is being sore, he puts his thumb on top of the stick, and now he's trying to create support through that thumb. And I'm like, that is making you shrug your shoulder. I said, take your thumb off. And he found it a bit harder, but he found a way. And then he did it with his good arm. And I was like, did you think about putting your thumb on the top? And he was like, I never even thought about it. I just did it with that one. And I was like, well, there you go then. So that's all, just simple little things like that. And by the end of the session, he was like, oh, my shoulder feels great today. It feels better than it's felt for weeks. And I was like, well, there you go. And it just means, I was saying this the other day as well. It's the thing of doing it over and over again. So that lady getting up off the floor in a lunge, if she does that today, she can do it tomorrow. And if she does it tomorrow, she can do it the next day. And if she does it the next day,
following week and she's been practicing it, she's like, I can do it now. I'm like, yeah, of course you can do it.
But then that's when people say like, oh, I used to be able to do that, but I can't anymore. It's like, because you haven't been doing it. Keep doing it. It takes 2 seconds. If you can do it today, you can do it tomorrow. Unless you fall off a cliff or something like that, or really hurt yourself or whatever. There's no reason not to. There's no reason not to be able to do it. And I use movements like that all the time. Because the other thing is, you get people who say, oh, well, just do this one thing and that'll fix that. And then just do this one thing. And then all of a sudden you've got a daily routine that's like 25 hours long because you're going to do all these one things. It's like, just check in on the biggest problem and then do that. And then once that's fixed, check in on it every week, once a week or
Pete,
something like that. And it's
Peter, going to that point, right? Like, before I work with anyone, I do about 7 or 8 assessments. And that's like my baseline point. I'm like, right, this is where you're at. We need to focus on this, this, and this. The amount of times that people don't even assess and they just expect to get results. I just find that like insane. Especially, it's always a good reference point as well, because when you're dealing with people in pain and stuff like that, a lot of the time they'll say to me, oh, it hasn't improved. And I'm like, okay, what, like not at all? They're like, yeah, no, not at all. Nothing's changed. And I mean, rightly or wrongly, I do like a pain scale. So some therapists think it's a good thing. Some therapists think it's a bad thing. But I always say 0 to 10. What does your pain feel like today? And they'll give me a guesstimate. If they come back the following week and it's like pain 6 that week and it's a pain 3 the following week, that to me is a 50% reduction in pain. That whatever we're doing is working. It gives me a guideline basically in order to give me sort of like some feedback that I'm doing a good job as well. If they came and said a pain 6 and the following week is a pain 9, I'll be like, okay, I'm not quite doing something right here. You know. But a lot of the time as well, I think, you know, kind of the journey I've gone on, like with CPDs, you know, exploring different routes. I think a lot of the time it's very easy to be an absolutist in you know, there's a lot of egos in the therapy world, out in the fitness world, and it's very easy to be an absolutist to say this is the right way, this is the wrong way. I try not to be like that. I try, if this thing works and this person's happy, then it's worked. Do you know what I mean? I'm happy with that. Equally, I like, if someone has an idea, I'll go, okay, I'll see if that works for me. You know, we talked before. I said, you know, I've picked up so many different things from different people and used that, like all the things that I think work best for me, and then sort of put that into my system in order to help people. Whereas, like, you know, sometimes we can stay rigid to these systems. You know, I think it's Perry Nicholson says it, like, where you, oh no, it came from Ida Roll, where you think it is, it isn't in terms of pain, right? Because invariably pain's a symptom, it isn't the cause. So a lot of the time therapists will go chasing, like as Perry says, stop chasing pain. They'll go chasing after the pain, try to look at, and that's why I love Perry Nicholson stuff, because I love the fact he does think a little bit outside the box. And you know, he takes a different view to things. I like the whole pain has an emotion. The pain has a hierarchy, and it starts with emotion. Lymphatic system, endocrine system, central nervous system, organs, musculoskeletal system. So invariably, if someone turns up with musculoskeletal pain, I'm actually assessing them before they even walk through the door. Like, I've got some steps down to my clinic. As soon as they appear at my house to come in down to the clinic, I've opened up the door and I'm hi, how are you? You know, chatting. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? Or, you know, does their facial expression show pain? You're assessing them the whole time before they've even entered into the treatment room, because emotion is an important and integral part to where they might be in terms of the hierarchy of pain. So if they're stressed, anxious, nervous, what's their breathing patterns going to be like? Is that going to impact, you know, how they respond, like how their hormones are? Is that going to impact then, like, you know, what's happening to their breath pattern? You know, all these kind of things can have an effect. If someone's got shoulder pain, then the first thing I look at is breath and core. Because you know, if this thing that you do thousands of times a day, i.e. breathing, and the pattern is like completely out of whack, you know, you're thinking like this kind of breathing, your chances are that it is going to create some form of tension around the neck and shoulders. That probably is going to be a bit of a factor to it. Invariably, what people do is go, oh, you got shoulder pain, I'll go straight after the shoulder, and lo and behold, it comes back again. You know,
how do people respond then to the way you do stuff? Because this is, I find it great because, you know, we've been on lots of the same courses and stuff like that, and I do the same as you. I pick up what what I need and what I'll want, and the rest of it I'll forget about it until I need it, until something shows up, and just and put things together in that way. But some people don't respond to it necessarily that well. They'll go, no, it's not my breathing. I've got a sore shoulder. And they'll not, it doesn't matter what you say. They'll be like, no, I just want to make my shoulder stronger. So get me to do something, or they'll just disappear. So how do people tend to respond to your kind of method?
Yeah, so that is a great question, because there's a few things related to that question. Firstly, my marketing is very specific. Oh, my door's just gone. Sorry. My marketing is very specific. So my target audience invariably will know what I do already, or if they don't, they're kind of on there. They've been to see like 5 or 6 different therapists. They've had this, you know, all the work done, and they're kind of at the stage where they're disillusioned, they're frustrated, and they're probably, going back to your point, Peter, they're willing to listen at that point, because they've tried everything else. And you know, for me, I'm always like, look, last point of call is something like a cortisone injection or operation. We don't want to go down that route, you know, and they don't want to go down that route as well. So these people generally find me. You know, I'll get people all over the country coming to see me, because they're trying to find someone who will think a little bit outside the box. And there's not many people that do. Trust me, it's I find it like a bit strange, really. Just think a little bit more laterally to stuff. And so I've already got that kind of level of buy-in already, if that makes sense. But like I've got a great example of a guy once who came to see me. He's a Mexican guy. He didn't fly from Mexico. I'm not that good. but he was a Mexican guy, really lovely fella. But when he turned up at the top of the steps, he had a sadness in his eyes that, like, you know, I knew, I felt deep down, and I guess intuition comes into it a little bit as well. But I knew deep down that this was more than shoulder pain, because he's coming to me with shoulder pain. And oh man, it was probably like one of my favorite ever treatments. I chatted to him. I listened to what he had to say, and I sort of said to this guy, I was like, is there like anything sort of bad happened to you in the last, you know, I don't want to pry too much, but anything bad happened to you in the last year or two? And he said, yeah, my wife died. I was like, oh wow, okay. And you could really see it in his breath and how he held himself. So I got him on the couch, lied down, we were doing some breath work. I was doing some very gentle soft tissue work, like very gentle, just kind of like, but I wasn't really doing anything. And like afterwards, I said, how's your shoulder? He goes, and now I don't know whether it is offloading something to someone, because he cried. I made me well up too, right? He was offloading something, and he got that off his chest, worked on a bit of breathing, and he was like, wow, my shoulder feels so much better. Honestly, this guy, get him back today, and he'd tell you, like, that was amazing, like what you did. I actually really didn't do that much. You know, taught him how to like breathe a little bit better, did a little bit of light soft tissue work. I didn't really do much more than that. Never seen the guy again since, and he still stays in contact with me. In fact, he messaged me the other day to see if I want to go out for a beer with him. But yeah, it's a really cool, you know, really cool experience. That guy, he's a really nice guy, really traumatic period of his time, and you know, it's sometimes people like that turn up and they're willing to just do anything, I think.
Because did you say in your hierarchy of, I think it was like a hierarchy of things that lead to the symptom of pain, was emotion the top one? Was that the first one you said? Yeah. So that's.
So I always like that. That's how I'm always sort of like engaging with people. Like, do they have anxiety? Have they got depression? You know, how they respond, you know what I mean, to the questions. You know, are they really chatty, or are they like really withdrawn? It's like all those things I think are really important to that. And also as well, I've got to try and create some form of buy-in, because a lot of times people don't even know who you are. And they're just kind of you know, they might have had a referral from someone, but fundamentally they still don't really know who you are as a person. So it's getting to know them as well. And I think those kind of things there, building that rapport, are so underrated in the therapy world. I mean, I guess after a while, people always, it's like personal training, and in your gym and that, James, you build rapport with those clients over a number of years. You become really good friends with them, right? It's kind of different in the treatment world, because my main aim is to empower them to take ownership of whatever it is they've got going on, go away, build their strength, whatever it is they need to do, rebalance. And then I might see them ad hoc sort of thing. And then the aim for me is to actually get rid of them.
Yeah.
For you, it's probably to keep them coming. And I'm like, you need to go away and take ownership of this stuff. I'll set you the tools and away you go and do it, sort of thing. So it's a different kind of relationship then,
Yeah, we had Stu McGill on probably a year or so ago now. I think it was a while ago, but he was talking about when people come to see him, that he sits down with them in nice kind of comfortable chair, sit down, talk, and spends like a long time talking with them just about their history and like all the things that you talk about, just to create rapport and just to get someone to relax and to really dig deep. And also Adam Meekins, when we had him on, I think it might have even been Paul who asked him the question about it was either Paul or Pete, it wasn't me, what would an ideal initial consultation look like? And Adam Meekins as well said, sit down, spend a lot of time talking to them, get to know them, get to know a lot about, don't just focus on, like you say, this shoulder, this shoulder, you've got to kind of look at the bigger picture. I was going to ask one of the things I saw from you, look, we mentioned it just before we started to record, was a post you put out a couple of weeks back, I think now, about the, which I just thought was really interesting. And again, it's something that we haven't discussed implicitly kind of with any of the guests that we've had on who do therapy and that sort of thing, but you did a post about the body and how different sort of areas of the body are designed to be more mobile or more stable, and how let's talk about that now, because then I've got a kind of a more general question that you might be able to help with as well, that I'm seeing a lot, and I'm sure Paul and Pete do a lot with there, and you probably do with a lot of your people that you see nowadays. But what was that post about that we saw?
That's basically Gray Cook's joint by joint approach to how the body should kind of function. So it's basically what he's saying is your body's built on a system of joints. So let's take, for example, your ankle joint, your knee joint, your hip joint, all the way up, right? So what he's saying is the ankle joint should have mobility, your knee joint should have stability, your hip joint should have mobility, your lumbar joint should basically be stable, thoracic spine should be mobile, cervical spine should be stable, shoulder mobile, elbow stable, wrist mobile. So you take every joint on joint, there's mobility, stability, mobility, stability. Now, what I find generally, and that's why I quite like this joint by joint approach, is that when someone is lacking, say, thoracic mobility, so they're unable to get rotation or like overhead, and their hips are tight, it's probably because their lumbar isn't stable. Now, going back to what we said about breath work and stuff like that, and why breath is so integral, when someone says to me, "Oh no, my core's strong, I can hold a plank 10 minutes or whatever," I'm like, "Okay, cool. Can I just assess your breath?" And then they breathe like this. I'm like, "Man, you haven't got a strong core." If you can't like activate your diaphragm, if you can't breathe into your diaphragm, it's not a case of maybe you are strong, maybe you are. No, your core is strong because it is compromised, right? So therefore, pelvic floor, transverse abdominis, multifidus, they're all probably compromised because of that one thing. So therefore, you have to then look at it, regress things to then stabilize again. So work with the breath, going back to what we talked about before. So when someone's locked down thoracic or hips, it's generally probably because they've got some lumbar stability issues. And so then we need to restabilize that. By restabilizing that over time, the thoracic spine should start to unlock and the hips should unlock. What I generally tend to do is I'll tend to do some mobility work or maybe some soft tissue work too to speed things along a little bit. But fundamentally, it's restabilizing the joint area that needs it. To get that back.
Because I think there is a kind of I don't know if it's a trend, but I think as well it's part of, you know, like through like when we had lockdowns and all that, everyone was kind of, well, not everyone, this kind of people we talk to we're going onto like YouTube and doing like yoga classes, you know, sessions that are easy to do at home, you know, that you could just do in the lounge and stuff. So people, I'm doing, you know, half an hour of yoga every morning, and I'm doing this and that. And we've spoken about it on the podcast a few times. You know, I think it's great that people want to, I think in general, people are becoming more aware of the need to be mobile and supple and flexible, or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. But we can go too far, can't we? And just and people almost become like what was that? Yeah, what was the word you said? Hyperflaccid. Yeah. I was going to say there was this Mr. You know, there was like, I think it was for a softener, like a TV commercial in the English.
Mr. Soft. It was for soft mints.
Oh, Mr. Soft. You know, all floppy and no kind of stability in the joints, and just be like really loose. And you see people who are we've got a lady at the gym who trains, she's about 60 now, I think, but she's really hypermobile, and she's really, you know, can sit just straight down into a squat with her bum basically on the floor and stand up and everything. But as soon as you try and actually load her in any positions, she's really weak, you know.
Cool. So going to that point, right? What is it that a man, Yogi's going to hate me now? Please don't hate me.
Don't worry, I think I pissed them off a couple of weeks ago. So there's none of them listening anymore.
Well, that's all right then. No, let's say, for example, you're really flexible at a joint, right? And you're really inflexible at another joint. Which joint are you going to want to stretch more? The one you're good at, right? Because it feels better. The one that feels tight as anything, you think to yourself, oh God, that feels painful. So there was once I was in the gym once, and the guy used to do these back bends all the time, super flexible. You used to sit back into this back bend. And one day I said to him, you do this kind of movement every day. What's your hamstrings like? He said, what do you mean? I said, can you touch your toes? He showed me, he could barely get past his knee.
Yeah.
I was like, why do you stretch, like do some stretching on that side rather than doing that pose every day? But because he looked good in the gym, and he probably raised a bit of a eyebrow or whatever. I'm not saying all yogis are like this, but fundamentally, what we're trying to create with all training or any movement or anything like that is balance, right? So you know, like who is it says flexible steel? I love that saying.
John Ingham, isn't it?
Yeah. Flexible steel. I mean, that's what you want. That's what I believe in training people to become, flexible steel. I love that saying. It's very descriptive of what you should be. You should be mobile enough to access positions. You know, like I like Adam Meek and stuff when he talks about like posture, for example. There's no such thing as perfect posture. I mean, that's a load of rubbish. Like there's different posture for different things, right? And you can, you know, I could be being stuck in a posture becomes the problem, i.e. being sat down for 8-10 hours a day. That could be an issue, right? But if you're constantly moving around, fundamentally that's not a problem. Even if you're slumped over like this 1 second, and then, you know, oh, he's got bad posture, all of a sudden he's upright, oh, he's got good posture. It doesn't matter, as long as you're not stuck in those postures. Equally, like when we're looking to load stuff, we don't load stuff like with a neutral spine and everything we do every day. I like to think of it like with stuff like neutral spine and all that kind of stuff is a beginner learns the rules, an intermediate practice the rules, and an expert breaks the rules. So what I mean by that, if we're loading someone, I want to let them kind of understand or feel what a neutral spine is. Let's practice moving in that neutral spine. Right, now you've got that. Right, let's do some Atlas stone lifts, or let's do some sandbag reps or whatever, inflection, you know, and start practicing that, because that's more real life, right? That's what we tend to do. We tend to round the spine when we pick stuff up on the floor. But everyone's like, oh, you're going to pop a disc or whatever, which rarely happens. But we're worried about that position. But it's just, and like, you know, we get so caught up in like being perfect. I say to them, it's never perfect. It's good enough. You know, when someone says to me, is that good? And I said, well, is that good to you? Well, yeah, it feels okay. Great, it's good enough. Let's do that. You know, let's not get too hung up on everything.
That's great.
You see, I moved away from the yogis very quickly.
That's great though, because this will help this will help. We had David Keown on. I don't know if you've seen him. He's an Irish guy who goes around like lifting, unearthing stones all over Ireland at the minute.
Oh,
and he's
okay,
strong
yeah.
lifting them.
Yeah.
But he's super hyper, like we're not hyper mobile, but he's super mobile as well because he does lots of yoga. But he's got the strength within those movements as well. And what you've just been saying there is, you learn a movement and then you can break the rules because life doesn't throw calibrated weights at you on a bar that is a certain length and a certain thickness and with certain knurling on it and all of that, does it? Like objects that we need to pick up day after day, kids and dogs and all sorts of stuff are like irregular, aren't they? And he's been showing that, you pick up irregular objects and it makes you stronger at picking up regular objects as well. So but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. The gym strength doesn't necessarily transfer over into real life all the time. So
totally.
One thing I was going to say, Ben, you've almost just teed it up perfectly. Was the kind of second part? Well, you did tee it up because it was the second question I was going to lead to, where you said you were talking about, because I know Perry Nicholson again, who we've had on before, friend of the show, talks about this kind of plasticity and if you stay in one position for ages, you can kind of get set in this kind of kidney bean position or cashew nut position. And the thing I was going to ask you was, a lot of our it would be the same for lots of people now, but a lot of our members at Unique Results are office-based work people who then, over the period of kind of being locked down, were working at home like for long periods of the time and then not leaving the house very much. And now I'm surprised the number of people who still work from home, 3 or 4 days out of the week and only go into the office 1 or 2. So predominantly they are sat at home. And I'm sure that people are getting more niggles and injuries and tightness and things than they were previously, just by being, like you say, because even if you get up in the day and you go and you travel to London, you're up, you're walking to the station, you're moving around, you're walking up and down the stairs at the station, you're going to work, you're going out at lunchtime. But a lot of people are literally, existing within 4 walls, certain days of the week, and may only be doing 1,000 or 2,000 steps a day total. I mean, do you notice people, this kind of pandemic of sitting, I suppose, that people have had, and then the kind of knock-on effects, lots of things around shoulders, and people are saying, well, because I always use a mouse on this, this hand, and I'm sat here, and obviously people probably, if they're kind of fairly senior and they're working from home, they're probably actually working longer than they would do if they'd be going into the office, because a lot of these people are logging on at 7, half 7 in the morning and not logging off till 6, half 6 in the evening, and they're barely moving apart from sitting at a desk.
I mean, also as well, they at home, they generally won't tend to have the ergonomic desk setup that they do in the office that they spend thousands on as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're, I mean, I said a minute ago, business is booming. So part of that business is booming is because, whereas twofold thing, I think, with that is obviously, like you said, from the back end of the pandemic, with like a lot of those issues, desk-bound posture issues. The other issue is obviously lack of getting into see GPs, people paying to get this stuff treated privately. So based on that, like, as anyone who's got a small business, I'm always looking over my shoulder, right? Thinking, oh God, when's the next, when's the next bit of business going to come? And especially when you're sort of, we're in a recession or leading into a recession or whatever. But, so I am looking over my shoulder, but, I have found the last sort of 6 months, it's just picked up and picked up and picked up. And, now I've probably got about 3 weeks in advance before I can book most people in. So it is, and it is probably partly because of both those reasons, I think. I mean, I spent, like I said, 17 years in Johnson & Johnson, which is basically all I did was work with desk-bound posture. And, it's not what I necessarily want to do. I like the more sports performance side of things, but performance to me could be performing in life, performing in their work. That's still performance to a degree, right? And so I guess I am kind of an expert with desk-bound posture because I've treated so many people over the years with desk-bound posture, you know, all the tight hips, tight neck, you know, the shoulder pain, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So if you could, that's interesting. So if you know, like you say, at Johnson and Johnson, that was when you were sort of running the corporate gym and corporate wellness and stuff for them. And like you say, so if you could, I mean, just trying to think for people to take takeaways from this podcast that can be kind of applicable. If there was, I don't know, 3 to 5 things that you could recommend for someone who does spend most of their time sat down at a desk on a computer to do, what would that be?
The key things I would say is try not to be stuck in a position. So, like, if you're in a nice, comfy chair, that's probably not a good place to be. You might think it is, but not for your body. If I'm working on my laptop or whatever, I actually put it on my on a stool and I work off the floor. I mean, granted, I don't spend 8 to 10 hours a day every day, so that's not everyone's cup of tea, right? But if you can't sort of find an uncomfortable position like on the floor to work off of, or you don't really, that's not really going to be your thing, then definitely adding in movement sort of snacks during your day rather than, you know, just sitting there solid, like probably every, I would say 50 minutes at least getting up and doing like 5 minutes worth of like gentle mobility work. It could be like touching your toes, it could be doing some T-spine rotational stuff, you know, you're getting on the floor doing some rotational stuff, whatever makes you feel good, you know. And then getting out and doing a walk would be 100%. You know, if you can't do any exercise and the only thing you've got access to is going for a walk, then make that a part of your routine for sure. And like also, like if you go to the gym, look to rebalance your body. So I see so many times like people in gyms doing like sit-ups, or you know, they're doing like leg extensions, or you know, they do chest presses, and then oh, so what do you do for work then? Oh, I've got desk-bound posture. I mean, that's going to feed that dysfunction, right? Oh, what other exercise do you do? Oh, I cycle. You know, it's the same, being stuck in those same positions. So look at doing some posterior chain stuff, you know, some more back work. I mean, I always think the best thing to do with all this stuff is get assessed. Everyone's individual, right? So everyone has their own issues, their own problems. I'm talking very generically back then, but you know, fundamentally, everyone has their own issues. Like, get assessed and find a program that suits you best for your needs. Look at, so like I'm when I'm talking about training and exercise and movement, the first thing I focus on is purpose. Like, why are you doing this exercise? If you can't give me a good solid reason why you're doing it, get rid of it. Yeah. So if I'm doing loads of chest presses and I'm already like stuck in my desk-bound posture, I'm probably going to say, why don't you do some chest stretching, and then do maybe some rhomboid work, or lower trapezius stuff, or maybe do some lat work. You know, let's rebalance that a little bit. Life's about homeostasis, about finding that balance. You know, stop feeding that dysfunction. You know, but you only know that through being assessed, right? And then, like after purpose comes principles, right? So understand that you have to have required mobility for certain things, require stability for these things. Understand about tension and relaxation, and then once you do that, Peter mentioned it earlier about motor control, positioning, and patterning. Yeah, these are all really integral parts of movement and exercise. So, like, you can do these generic things and movement snacks and stuff like that, really cool. But I would be assessed and focus on my programming to rebalance myself. That's what I look at. I look at my training plan as a thing to build me up in the gym to fight all the things I do daily, which is sitting down at a desk for 8 hours at a time, stuck there in front of a computer. That's what my training plan would be.
It's interesting. So I suppose the practical things there are not get set in a position, you know, move maybe for 5 to 10 minutes every hour, try and get out for 1 or 2 walks throughout the day. And like you say, I think probably, I know it's you can't, you know, you can't give like blanket advice to every single person on the planet, but if you're spent, you know, 8 to 10 hours a day sat down, hunched forwards, you could probably do with stretching off the front of the body and strengthening the back of the body, couldn't you?
That's as easy as that.
Yeah. It's so yeah, no, that's fantastic. And we know, go on, sorry.
I was gonna say, like, some of the time we see the gym as a place, like people think the gym is a place to be broken down. And I think we need to get rid of that misconception. I see it as a place to build you up as a human, make you more balanced, make you stronger, make you fitter, make you, feel better about yourself. It's a place of building you up. Well, I don't know why we're so intent all the time on trying to beast this person. Oh yeah, look at this workout. That guy's dead on the floor. And we think that's great and we applaud that. I find that strange. Like, to me, it's like, yeah, let's get there. Let's rebalance this person. Let's make this person stronger overall. Let's do all these really cool things rather than, going to the gym. I mean, going to the gym and getting injured. I mean, I think it's pretty much one of the stupidest things you can do. You're in a closed environment, pretty much. If you're in an open environment like you're doing jiu-jitsu or something like that, then I'd fully expect you to potentially at some point get injured, right? But in a closed environment, it's you against the gym, as it were. You've got to be a little bit unlucky to get injured, unless you're ego lifting or whatever, It should be a place of, if you've got a structured, purposeful, programmed plan that you're following, you shouldn't get injured. And it should be a place totally, if desk-bound posture or you're an elite athlete, whatever, that is the place to build you up,
Excellent. I think that's great. I think we've been on for nearly an hour now. I mean, that's a really good kind of wrap up kind of message, I suppose, to start to close on, because I think that, that's fantastic. I mean, that's what we try and get across. Lots of people, obviously, every week the message on here is the anti kind of beasting with generic workouts, and you've got to leave every session half dead and all the rest of it. It really is more about it's more health and longevity, as we're health oddity, rather than going all out and, like you say, injuring yourself by overdoing it and using your ego. But Pete, anything you'd like to kind of start to wrap up with? And I mean, we've covered a hell of a lot there today in the last sort of hour, but it's anything you'd like to add?
Not really, no. I mean, we've covered a hell of a lot there. It's just it is interesting. Just the last thing Ben was talking about there. There's a new guy started with me this week. The guy with a sore shoulder, because he'd hurt his shoulder and stuff. He's in his 40s. He had a trainer years ago, I don't know when, he was saying, and he ached every single day. And he was doing like 2 or 3 sessions a week or whatever, but he ached every single day. Every day. And he was like, it was awful. And I was like, that's not what we do here, by the way. So hopefully he's only on a trial at the minute, but hopefully he'll sign up, because it's like, I've basically given him exactly what he wants. I'm going to make it so it doesn't hurt. And you can do but you can do cool stuff, and you can probably you'll get to do quite heavy, because he said he used to squat 140 kilos or something. And I'm like, well, that's great, but why? But if I can get you to do that without it making you sore, then brilliant, let's do that. But the other thing as well about the desk posture and everything, I had a guy who's had a sore lower back, and he's got a mobility routine that he does at night before he goes to bed. And I asked him what was involved in it, and every one of them, basically, he wasn't doing any hip extension whatsoever. It was all hip flexion. It was like because he does a bit of yoga as well, so it was like crow pose and down dog and all of this sort of stuff. And I was like, your hips you're not opening them up at all. So I got him to do that, but then he mentioned it to his yoga teacher as well. He's got him doing some weird hanging thing that opens his hips up apparently. But it's making a massive difference. He goes, "Oh, my back feels so much better," and he was focusing on trying to stretch his back out, and it's like, no, stretch your hips out, open your hips up, and that'll do it, And he's a cyclist, and he sits for work and all of that. So it was like, there you go. So it was just that one little thing, because he said, "I've now got to put that into my entire routine," and I was like, "Your entire routine isn't working, because it's been like that for ages. So get rid of one of the things that's not working and stick this in instead." So it's like you say, people think that they're stretching things out and it makes them feel better, but it just tightens up again the next day, or as soon as you finish, doesn't it? So it's like, do the opposite of what you're actually doing, and then everything might get all right.
Paul, do you have anything you'd like to say as we conclude?
The thing about rehab is it's probably more complex for people to get their head around than training. When we talk about like 6 movements or fundamentals in personal training, we're thinking about well, okay, we're using a barbell, just sticking a bar on a back, squatting, picking it up off the floor, pressing it overhead. It's pretty simple. One of the things that frustrates me, particularly when I used to have the majority of my injuries, when I first started out, particularly as I started to push myself and discover new kind of weaknesses, was that I felt extremely overwhelmed about the rehab process. And I think one of the things that I've spent time doing, and I certainly found with my shoulders, is I just narrowed it down to like one exercise that really had a big bang for its buck. And I think often, I'm now at a point in my own training where I'm less, is occasionally do dip into pain, when I techniques off or I'm tired or something like that. And that's often like either ego or a new exercise, which I haven't got experience in, or I've just pushed myself. And I'm now trying to spend a lot of time trying to work out like what is going to give, I'm working on the fundamentals in a sport. What are the fundamentals in mobility that I can actually spend my time on? And what are the fundamentals that I need to weave into a class that would allow me to create a resilient body in terms of the things that support the basics of personal training? How do I, if I'm going to get someone to squat, if I'm going to get someone to deadlift, I'm going to get someone to press something overhead, what are those complementary performance-based rehabilitation stroke strength work that I could do? And navigating that without buying 50 books that all tell me something different is something that I'm always playing with. And to the point where I sometimes just go, okay, I'm just going to rely on a couple of things. Do you have like I know I'm elongating the end of this, but do you have like not a checklist, like almost like a rule of, like a handbook of a way of just evaluating the quality of an exercise for the goal? It's like, okay, so someone's got this issue. Like, for example, at the moment, I'm struggling to get a lockout in my arm on my left side with kettlebell sport in the jerk. And I'm not in pain. I don't know. So everyone tells me something different. So I have no idea where to spend my time. So do you have like a tick list of like, okay, evaluate these things in a joint or in a movement in order to make a decision about a path?
Okay. I mean,
that's a complex question, isn't it?
That is so complex because it's without actually assessing. So I guess the key thing of that is assessment. So I make my assessment process. It used to be hugely complicated. I mean, I used to do about 20 different checks for things. I've now cut that down to about 7. I maybe 1 or 2 others for different things, and I may do some manual testing as well if needed. But fundamentally, I have about 7 checks, and it will be things like checking ankle mobility, checking hip mobility. So it's hip flexion. Looking at like doing like a toe touch test. So say for example, someone wanting to do deadlifting, first thing I do is, can you touch your toes? If they can't touch their toes, straight legs, I wouldn't get them deadlifting, not from the floor anyway. I do an overhead overarm extension test, the thoracic extension, the T-spine rotation test, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And I can glean all my information. I'll assess the squat as well, so I'll have a look at how they squat, and that's about it really. And that'll give me as much information I need to know for most things. I may then go into a bit more detail with something, if it's like, is it a shoulder impingement type issue, or is it like, do I need to test for something else? Then I'll go into a bit more detail. But as a real basic assessment process, that's what I look at. I maybe look at leg length discrepancy as well.
I think that's why I was initially quite fascinated by the ATG system, because it seemed to take archetypes of movement and then apply a particular training exercise and then a progression within that, which simplified that process for someone who's not an expert in rehabilitation or movement. And I think trying to get, I think that's one of the big things that interests me at the moment is the simplification of, but
the whole thing is complicated. I mean, what I've taken is I've gleaned stuff from the functional FMS test. I've taken stuff from sport therapy. I've taken stuff from people like Alex Effer, who's got a really good biomechanics assessment test. I've taken like stuff from different people, and I've gone, do you know, that test works really well for me. I'm going to use that, and I've kind of like made it my own. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but it works for me. And it works for the people that I see. And yeah, it is trickier, and it is a little bit more complex process. But if you've, like I said, if you've got like, if you look at the ankles, the hips, and the thoracic spine, and shoulder mobility, other than that, that's the main kind of areas to focus. That's what I would focus my attention to primarily in an assessment.
Yeah, well, I suppose then people can actually do it, because one of the things people get is overfaced by the sheer volume of things, isn't it?
Yeah,
That they can often. I've seen in the past seen people, and they give me like 40-minute routines to rehab a shoulder, and you're like, that's just not going to happen, you know?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's taken it depends on how the therapist takes the approach to it. So for me, it's like I would try to like integrate some of the exercises into the routine you're doing already.
Yeah.
Like you might say to me, I do shoulder presses, standing military press. I'll say something like, why don't we do like a half kneeling landmine press instead? You've got shoulder pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're adding a bit of extra stability into that movement. You're only working one arm, so you're going unilateral rather than bilateral. You're not actually going directly overhead if you've been having some issues. You're actually pushing out here, but getting you to control. So your motor control perhaps can be better with what happens with the scapula. You know, it's just like just playing about with some of the exercises sometimes. That exercise manipulation really, but you're still pressing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not
cool.
how you
So
want to
that's
that
it, yeah.
period, but until you address that issue, that sounds to me what you've got going on there is more like something potentially going on with the lat, or like an impingement in the traps, maybe. But that's potentially what I look at. Maybe a thoracic spine. Invariably, the problem with the shoulder is like it is a very complicated joint. But the key things that people go after is actually then the joint itself, when invariably it's what's happening at the scapula, what's happening at the thoracic spine. It could be, you could track it all the way back. Is it breath? Is it core problems?
Yeah.
Is there a relationship, along your, your anterior oblique sling or posterior oblique sling? It's looking at those things. And then obviously for you, that's my job as a therapist then to go actually to figure out the piece of the puzzle and go, actually, it's this. I mean, I once had a guy who had a shoulder problem, and like he saw all these different people. I had a look. He had a punctured lung, and he had a scar where they did whatever they did into his lung. And all I did was did some soft tissue work around that scar, sorted out the problem. Do you know what I mean? I just thought, what's everyone else done? I listened to what he'd had done already. I said, well, anyone gone after this scar? He said, no. So I went after the scar, sorted his problem. So, everyone's, it's quite hard to be universal with that approach. But I always say ankle, hips, thoracic spine and shoulders are a good place to start for anyone with mobility issues.
No, that's great. Excellent. Ben, if people want to follow you to find out more about what you do and potentially, I mean, do you do any kind of online work, or are you all in person?
I do online work. I prefer to do face-to-face, James.
Yeah.
But
and you're in High Wycombe, are you? You're based in High Wycombe?
High Wycombe, my clinic. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do online work. I prefer that face-to-face interaction, if I'm honest. And I like to be hands-on too, which obviously you don't get the benefit from when you're kind of online. So
yeah. So if people do want to kind of follow you, find out a bit more, even just to kind of follow the content you put out, and then potentially down the line, if anyone wants to get in touch with you for any, sports therapy and work like that, what's the best thing for people to do?
They can get hold of me on my website.
Yeah.
So it's www.fit6.co.uk.
So is that fit, FIT, and then the number 6?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
.co.uk. Or follow me on Instagram, which is Ben Causa _fit6 number 6 again.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, no, thanks so much for coming on, Ben. 'cause
Yeah,
that's
thanks
been
for
a
having me
really-
on, mate.
That's been a really interesting discussion. Like I say, we've talked about some bits there that we haven't touched on in the previous, 130 episodes. So
Well, that makes me feel good, especially with the type of people you had on there. So.
that was really good. And and hopefully I'll get to see you at some stage at a course or a workshop or something,
sure we'll
something
catch
in
up,
the near future. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah, excellent. So thanks so much, guys, for listening. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're listening on a platform that allows you to do so. And if you'd like to join the Facebook group, just go on Facebook in groups, search Health Oddity, click on join, and then one of us will let you in. We will be back next week with our second visit from Brett Jones, the Director of Education for Strong First, coming live from Pittsburgh in America. He'll be talking about his latest book, Iron Cardio. So that will be good. So we will see you next week for episode 132. Have a fantastic week, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.